good morning, bonjour, from Toronto, where it is hot and sunny, and I'm trying my best to avoid it, and also my bangs because, well, welcome to another episode of What the Heck Am I Gonna Do with My Growed Out Bangs Today? No, guys, it's Tea with Me. It's another episode of my video chat conversations with creative people living in various states of quarantine and lockdown during the COVID 19 pandemic. Today's interview is with Leila Taylor. She is an author of this fantastic book called Darkly, Black History and America's Gothic Soul. It's part memoir about growing up as a young black woman who was into the goth scene, but also exploring the Gothic horror and film and music and art through that lens of Black American history. Highly recommended. So I called her in Brooklyn, where she also works for the library. She's like a creative director of the Brooklyn Library System. So I wanted to talk to her about when our libraries are going to reopen, and of course, all things Gothic. Leila, thank you for joining me for a conversation over tea live from Brooklyn. Welcome to my living room.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited. I'm honored to be here.
I loved your book. And when it came out, I thought, I want to write about this book or I want to review it for my channel. And then I never got around to it. So when I started this series and I made a wish list of people, I was like, oh, this is my chance. It gives me an excuse. So I'm glad we can make it work.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So why don't we just start at the beginning? Tell me where you are. Tell me how you're doing. What does sheltering in place look like for you right now?
I'm in my one-bedroom apartment. I'm fortunate that I live alone, which is good for me. I'm in a pretty good position here. I'm working from home. I like my space. I'm a little bit of a homebody, so my lifestyle hasn't changed all that much, really. It's really going outside that's the thing that actually brings me down. The thing that's supposed to, lift my spirits, like taking a walk outside or going to a park or something. That's when I really feel the change in the atmosphere, the sort of underlying dread over everything that exists. And I'll see people not wearing masks and I'll start getting angry. So, that thing that's supposed to cheer me up, literally leaving my apartment and going outside, I come back a little bit, down, actually. I mean, it's, my life is literally going from my bedroom office to my living room. I kind of denote time based on whether or not my laptop is on my desk or whether it's on my couch. I have like my daytime slippers and then my like evening slippers, I try to, like, every day I get up at the same time I normally would and take a shower and get dressed, and I try to, keep as normal a routine as possible. But then there are moments where I'm like, I really miss going places to do things. I'm really looking forward to. I was talking to a friend of mine about the last movie we saw in a movie theater, and not really thinking that it was going to be like the last movie we saw in a movie theater. I was walking to a drugstore, and I would normally like stop at a coffee place and get a cup of coffee and and drink it and walk with it on my way to the store. And I'm walking and I stop and I realize I can't drink my coffee and walk at the same time because of the mask. But it's a brand new world, and it's going to be different for a while now, so
I don't think you're alone in any of the things you've just said. It has occurred to me too that even if the place is open, I can't get a drink. But this is a good segue to what we're drinking. I like your mug. Can you tell me anything about the mug and what you're drinking for tea?
The mug, I don't know if you can see. See, now I have to do this, and hopefully I won't spill it on myself. It's by this artist named Dan something. I can't read it, but it's called Calamity Ware. And I don't know if you can see, but there's like monsters attacking, and there's like a Bigfoot like attacking somebody, and then there's like sea creatures coming up. There's like a pirate about to get you. So I thought it was kind of appropriate for the times. Calamity Ware.
I
Um,
I kind of love it. It's like a riff off traditional uh, dining ware, right? Like pattern.
exactly. Yeah. Um, and I'm drinking builder's tea. It's probably the least fanciest tea imaginable, but like I stopped drinking coffee a while ago, or I'm trying to cut down on coffee, and I found it's British. It's what British construction workers drink. It's just this. It's like PG tips but stronger. You know, it's just sort of this really hearty, strong coffee, and you put lots of milk in it. But and it's just called builder's tea. So that's what my tea is these days.
Uh, I went back to one of my favorites that I had at the beginning of the series, which are these Jasmine, they called dragon pearls. It's like a hand rolled little balls from David's Tea here in Canada. And I don't know if you can see this. I'm going to reveal this mug, which is
Oh, that's nice.
drinking the tears of Robert Smith. So, tears. I pointed to you. It means I don't get to see it, but you get.
Right. Perfect.
What was going on in your life right before this happened? What plans did you have? Where were you working? And then what changed?
I was just about to go on vacation to Leeds in England to visit my best friend, and I haven't had a real vacation in a few years. And I was just looking forward to, drinking gin and tonics and, hanging out in the garden and just relaxing. And I'd never been to Leeds before, so I was super psyched to hang out there. And I was kind of hanging on till the last minute. I just was like, well, they're still letting international travel. It's still in the okay zone. And it finally got to the point where it's like, no, I can't go. So yeah, so my vacation canceled. We stopped. I was working. I can't. Time has no meaning. I can't even remember when we closed at the library, but March something. Yeah, and I was working as usual, and then there was this slightly chaotic mode of whether or not we were gonna work from home, and whether or not we were gonna stay open, and whether or not we were gonna close. So ever since then, we've just kind of kept going, but just working from home. But yeah.
I'm sorry that you didn't have a chance to go to Leeds. I've never been either, but always wanted to because of the Goth history from Leeds, which is my segue into talking about your book, Darkly. I'll ask you the question people always ask me. Why did you want to write a book about Goth?
Well, it started off with looking at sort of Black folks or people of color in the Goth scene. And I would go to an event, or I'd go to a show, or go to a thing, and I'd look around, and I'd either be the only Black person there, or like one of two or something, two or three, And I just was like, why is this? And people give these really kind of glib surface answers about economic reasons, or like Black people don't like weird stuff or whatever. And I was like, no, that can't be just it. So I started off wanting to look at Blacks and Goth in the subculture, but kind of figured out really quickly it was kind of boring, because Black Goths are the same as any other kind of Goth. It's kind of the way of being in a subculture is that you're all doing the same stuff and dressing the same, and you like the same stuff. And
no, we're all individuals. How can you say that?
Well, part of that is the difference between a Black Goth in America is that they're a Black person in America. And I started thinking about the song Strange Fruit. And I was listening to it and I was like, this is the most fucking goth song I've ever heard in my life. And that's when it broadened to not just be about goth as a music genre or the culture, but more about the Gothic and what was Gothic about the African American experience and how that experience and that trauma and sort of the residual effects of the transatlantic slave trade that are still going, that still exists, how we sort of deal with that trauma, how we process it, whether in art or music or literature, all of that culturally is kind of the American Gothic. It's the American version of what the Gothic is all of that trauma. And I could go into Native American. I think there's a Native, I want there to be a Native American Gothic blow up because I want to read more about that and want to see more about that because it's kind of the same thing. It's this history of bodies that this country has kind of built itself with, and all of the denial. We're a country that's really big on denial, who wants to cover it up. We want to deny our history. We want to pretend everything's okay, pretend that everyone should be over it. And all of that has to go somewhere. You can't repress all of that and it not seep out somewhere. And it seeps out in culture, and it seeps out in art and music and literature and things like that, and the way we mourn and the way we grieve and the way we dress and all of that stuff. So that's how it became that. And then I started talking, and then it's hard to talk about racism without talking about my own experience. So then, it's a little bit of a memoir of me talking about being a Black goth kid in Detroit, and what that experience was like. So it's a mix of all sorts of, there's a lot jammed into a relatively small book.
Well, I'm glad that you did it because I've said this before. It's the first text that I've read about goth subculture written by a Black American. I'm sure that there are academic texts out there, and there may be also other things that I've missed, but I have a pretty extensive goth reference library. Almost everything in English comes from England.
Yeah.
I love them, but they're the whitest of the white, right?
Yeah.
So even though I know that there are goths, so many goths in Mexico and, other countries in the world, either because of language or resources, I just don't get to read about that. Even Japanese, Gothic, I found, where is the English language guide to really, written by someone from there, not an outsider, to explain it. I haven't found it. So your book was like, oh, great, I can read something new about goth other than just the same, I have a lot of friends who've written books and I've done it too, but a lot of it is the same history over and over, just updated or with a different point of view. And you had a lot of things in this book that I'd never thought about before, or in that way. Strange Fruit, obviously I know this song, this classic American song. I don't remember ever really noticing the Susie version. And then you've got this great chapter about really examining these other versions of the song and what the point is. And I would encourage people to go into that in more detail with your book. So it's nice to have this on the shelf with those other books for sure.
Yeah, I'm slightly terrified of Susie Sue getting her hands on this because I love Susie and the Banshees with all my heart, but I kind of, I'm a little critical of her.
Susie is my dream interview, right? I've interviewed a lot of goth musicians, whether they will admit to being goth or not. Not all of them. I've never interviewed Andrew Eldridge, for example, but Susie is such an icon for me, such an influence, and I want to interview her. And it's how could you interview Susie and not ask her about wearing a swastika?
I know.
Like in the 70s, like there's so many things. So
Name.
I hope you get a chance maybe someday to ask her some of those questions if I don't.
If someone out there has seen an interview or an article on this, I have never found an article or an interview that gives a satisfying answer about why she picked the name Susie or Sue, why the play on Sue. I've only seen this sort of general, like, oh, it's an homage to the Sioux tribe and the Sioux people or whatever. And I'm like, okay, what? Why? Huh? I don't know.
What does it say about me that I've never thought about it before?
Oh, yeah, Sioux Indians. That's the spelling. Yeah.
It's like Ian Astbury and his Native American fixation. And he did live in Canada close to a reservation and was exposed. But, you know, there are some questions to ask some of these people and
Yeah.
not real opportunity to do so. So maybe one day get somebody on the phone with them.
But to go back to actually kind of touch on the point about writings and books about things, they're there and they're scattered around, and a lot of it is deep in academia. So a lot of it is inaccessible. A lot of papers about, Black Gothic or indigenous peoples, Gothic or Japanese, or, all of these other kind of marginalized groups. They're out there and they're all behind some paywall or some academic, wall, or it's in a book that's, $80 or something like that. So there isn't a lot out there academically or critically that's accessible, But there are a lot of people online. There are a lot of websites and a lot of blogs of people who of Black folks who are talking about Gothic stuff. They're out there, and it took, it just took a little searching to find them.
Every once in a while, something will flare up on social media and there'll be like kind of an inside discussion, like canceling a certain fashion brand because they put a t-shirt out that says like Goth is white, or a YouTuber will say something that's very ignorant or inflammatory or whatever, but it's only a certain group of people talking about it, and then the outrage goes away and we move on. Yeah. So I didn't flag this to you in advance, so I'm putting you on the spot, and we can always circle back to it another time if you don't have an answer, but like, do you think Goth has a problem with race, and where is the place to actually talk about that?
I think Goth has a problem with race the way sort of any subculture would have a problem with race. I think there is an illusion that Goth is somehow more inclusive. It's more inclusive in gender, and more inclusive of ethnicity or religion. That I think there's an illusion that there's somehow, we're this, precious safe space where everyone is welcome. But that's not true, because we live in a racist society. So it's as much as I think people want to believe that it isn't touched by this stuff. It is. I know myself personally, I've actually never felt I've never felt unwanted, or I've never felt left out by Goth people. Like, I have not had that experience personally. I might feel personally sometimes a little isolated because, I'm the only one there, but I've never had the experience of going into a space and people saying like, what are you doing here? Fuck out. But it doesn't mean that that kind of attitude doesn't happen. And I think it happens more online where people can hide, you know.
Well, online is a garbage dumpster of ideas. And wow, so every day I'm trying to figure out what to do with my bangs as they grow out. I don't know what your hair, I don't know what your hair situation is, but today this is happening. So apologies for that, but this is the world we live in right now.
I started cutting my own hair a while ago, just clippers. And at one point I was like, no, I'm gonna like be a normal person and go to a salon. And so I started actually getting it cut for real. And then this happened and I was like, I can't take it anymore. And then I just started shooting at myself.
So I have to confess, I'm worried about libraries. As I know you're not a branch librarian, but someone who works in the library system, I wanted to ask you, because I go to the library all the time. And in my community, it's used as a community center for sure. In our city, they've just said, I mean, it's no longer against the law in the province to have a library open, but you have to have all these rules in place. I mean, the library is a place where you go and everybody's touching the same thing. What kind of discussions are happening in the library community? What do you think is going to happen? Are they coming back?
So much. So I work in the marketing department, the marketing and communications department. I'm the creative director. So there have been so many meetings. My boss just put together this massive spreadsheet of planning of what to do, and we're looking at other library systems about what they do. I think the DC system had a plan that was something like 70 pages long on what to do. I mean, it's something that touches everything from circulation to security, of course, janitorial stuff. How do you communicate social distancing using computers? If you have a computer bank where there's, do you have to take out one every other computer? You can't really decontaminate books, or can you? I think the idea is that they're trying to figure out these systems of if someone returns the book, that there's no actual physical contact, and then it goes to book ops where they clean it or scan it or shoot it with lasers or whatever it is they do to books before it returns. Yeah, there's a lot of there's a lot to think about.
I could talk to you for a long time, but I don't want to keep you forever. I do want to ask you though, what's next for you in terms of your writing and your work? What's happening with Darkly in terms of its like lifespan? Obviously, people aren't doing book tours right now, but do you have upcoming projects to do with Darkly, or have you started writing or thinking about writing something else? Like, do you have more that you want to say about the Gothic experience?
Yeah, I was lucky in that most of the big signings and readings and most of that stuff ended. And that was kind of how I timed my vacation. So I was like, oh, all of my, events for the book are ending, so now I can go on vacation. There were a few talks that I was going to give that obviously got canceled or postponed. And that's something I actually really do enjoy doing, is doing talks or presentations, more so than like doing an author talk or just reading. I do a good slideshow. So something that got canceled. So hopefully that'll be rescheduled for some point in the future. And I was really bummed because I was going to do one at Greenwood Cemetery, which is just my favorite place on the planet. And I've been, anyway. So hopefully that'll be rescheduled at some point.
Are you able to go on cemetery walks in Brooklyn? Are they open? Is it like okay etiquette?
It's funny you say so. So like Greenwood is massive. I think it's something like 475 acres or something like that. And, I'd go there for walks or events. Like, I'm used to hanging out there, right? And because it's so big, they sort of made an announcement saying, hey, we're like a park. And if you need to get out, fresh air, you can walk around and socially distance and all that. So I went to meet a couple of friends of mine there, and it was so crowded. And there were like all these people like jogging and stuff, like not the usual cemetery crowd, right?
I love that there is a usual cemetery crowd.
Right.
I know what you're talking about too.
Exactly. And they had to send out a press release telling people, we're an active cemetery. There's still funerals being held here. People still come here to pay respects to their loved ones. Please don't climb the trees or walk your dog, or play Frisbee, like, please be respectful. Please don't like play music. It's not, it's still a cemetery, and I thought, see, Goths know how to behave in cemeteries. Like, we know how to act in a cemetery. So it was a little bit, I was walking around and I was just like, all these people are in my house. What are they doing here? So I actually haven't been back. It just annoyed me.
I think for the most part, we mostly know how to behave in cemeteries. Certainly after the age of 20, we should know. I don't know about like elaborate photo shoots like after the age of 20, like draped over somebody's grave. But I talked to my friends about this. My moral dilemma about whether to be cremated or to be buried, because I don't want my last act on earth to be environmentally selfish, right, and take up all the space, but I really want like an awesome headstone.
I'm the exact same way. I have the exact same dilemma. I want a gorgeous piece of marble in the dirt that, Goths 50 years from now will, languish on, with the artificial rose or whatever they're doing at that point.
All right, so let this be a record for both of us in the future. I'm going to put this on YouTube, make sure that it lasts, that when I'm dead,
yeah,
hopefully I will have a beautiful tombstone, because that will be an option. And people are welcome to come and take pictures there any time. I would love someone to visit me. I don't have kids, so eventually I'm going to run out of people who are alive who know who I am. And when people want to come and hang out on my grave, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I want a tombstone that people want to take pictures of.
Right.
Like, when they're yeah, I want one of those. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, see, Goths, even in the middle of a global pandemic where a lot of people are really having a tough time, we can still make jokes about death, and it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
My last question is always, hopefully, one of hope, which is, when you think about coming out of this the other side, what are you hopeful for? Are there changes that you hope happen? Are there things that you're looking forward to doing? What's the good side after all of it?
I really, really hope that we learn something from this as a country. I think how I feel is going to have a lot to do with what happens in the presidential election in November. I think we have a chance. I mean, we had a chance with Bernie Sanders, and Elizabeth Warren. But anyway, I don't get too political. We can either use all of this to learn and make some kind of huge structural changes that are necessary, because all of this has exposed the massive problems in our healthcare system. I mean, we knew it already. We just made it a million times worse. All of this is showing the huge discrepancy in income and between the haves and the have-nots. It's exposing, this pandemic has hit Black and brown people far, far, far worse. It's exposing all of the flaws that are inherent in our system. And my hope is that for once in our nation's history, we actually learn from our experiences to make actual real change and actually do something big. Because we're running out of time, I know this doesn't sound very hopeful, but between climate change and now this, we got to do some big stuff fast, And so my hope is that a lot of the goodwill that we see around, of the people who are helping other people and the people who are fighting the good fight, hopefully there's more of them than the others, and I also think that whatever the horror stories and horror movies, whatever, I'm curious to see what's going to come out of this, because it's gonna happen. People are probably already starting to write about it. So I'm curious as to see how all of this experience translates into whatever the next monster is. Yeah, there's gonna be good. I'm excited to
Well,
read those.
my wish is that we were all still around to see that happen. And, hopefully at some point I will get to meet you in person at some fabulous smart event. In the meantime, I'm glad we could have this virtual chat with our teas. Thanks again for joining me for tea. Let's keep in touch. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.